It was February 5th, 2003 in Madrid, Spain. Just after midnight, a bus driver pulled into a stop to let off passengers. As he turned the corner, his headlights fell upon something lying on the pavement. A man was sprawled out, motionless. Alarmed, the driver stopped, opened the doors, and cautiously stepped outside. The man on the ground was bleeding, badly. Without wasting a second, the driver called the police. Authorities arrived within minutes. They secured the area and transported the victim's body to the forensic medical center. By morning, news of the killing had already spread. A 28-year-old man had been found dead with severe head trauma and significant bleeding from one of his eyes. Media outlets across Spain covered the story in shock. Crime reporters rushed to the scene to gather any clues they could. But when they arrived, it was too late. Municipal cleaners had already scrubbed down the site. Any trace evidence, DNA, footprints, fibers, was gone. The big question now was, who was this man and why was he killed? The autopsy revealed that he had been shot in the head. But oddly, nothing was stolen. His wallet and personal items were untouched. Friends and family described him as kind, friendly, and well-liked. He had no enemies. One strange detail stood out. Police discovered a playing card beside the body, the Ace of Cups. This was not a typical playing card like those found in most of Europe or America. Spanish playing cards have unique suits and designs. The Ace of Cups in Spanish decks often symbolizes wealth or fortune if upright, but loss or ruin if reversed. Was it a message, a warning, or a sick signature from the killer? At first, investigators treated the card as an odd but insignificant clue. Perhaps it had simply blown there by the wind. Crime was not uncommon in Madrid. At the time, a murder occurred roughly once every 3 days, so they filed it away and moved on. They wouldn't be able to ignore it for long. Weeks passed without another incident. Just when authorities thought the killer might have disappeared, he struck again. It was late March and an elderly man was walking through a small park in the outskirts of Madrid. He had taken this route every evening for years. But this night would be different. Neighbors later reported hearing a loud bang. One of them called the police. When officers arrived, they found the man lying near a bench, lifeless. Same story. Shot in the head. No sign of struggle. Nothing stolen. And next to his body, once again, lay the Ace of Cups. This time, panic gripped the entire city. People were afraid to go out after dark. News channels ran special reports nightly. Talk shows invited criminologists and psychologists to try to explain what kind of person would commit these acts. Was he a vigilante, a madman, someone trying to send a message? The police formed a special task force. They began examining all known criminals with similar MOs. They also analyzed mental health records, looking for anyone released recently who matched the profile. A press conference was held. Authorities confirmed that the same type of handgun had been used in all 3 shootings. Ballistics proved it was the same weapon. But there were no fingerprints, no DNA, no surveillance footage. Nothing. Despite the growing pressure, the killer was always one step ahead. Scene 4. The Narrow Escape. April 12, 2003. A student named Luis was returning home from a late shift at work. His usual shortcut took him through a quiet alley. He had walked this route countless times without incident. Halfway through, he noticed a man walking toward him. Luis didn't think much of it until the stranger raised a gun. Luis reacted on instinct. He dropped his backpack and darted sideways just as the shot rang out. The bullet missed by inches. The shooter tried to reload, but Luis was already sprinting. He didn't look back. He ran straight to the nearest police station. Officers accompanied him back to the scene. He searched the area thoroughly and once again found something familiar. An Ace of Cups. For the first time, the killer had failed. Luis described the man as nearly identical to Anahid's description. Thin, medium height, dark skin, scruffy beard. But he added one detail. new detail breathed fresh life into the investigation. Now, they weren't just looking for a face. They were looking for a man with a very specific walk. Police increased patrols in public parks and alleys. Citizens were urged to stay vigilant. For the first time, they had a lead that could narrow the list. But the killer wasn't done yet, and the game he was playing had only just begun. Late April, police were beginning to piece together the killer's behavior. He struck at random, different neighborhoods, different victim profiles, but always left behind the same calling card, the Ace of Cups. While this made him unpredictable in location and victim, the consistency of his signature revealed a craving for recognition. The psychological profiler brought in by the task force argued this point passionately. He wants to be known. He's not killing for money or revenge. He's performing, she said on national television. He's feeding on the chaos he creates, and the Ace of Cups is his applause. On May 3rd, 2003, Madrid was on edge. Extra officers were deployed to public transportation hubs, late-night hangouts, and city parks. Despite the vigilance, it wasn't enough to prevent the next attack. This time, the victim was a 35-year-old night shift janitor named Tomas. He had just finished work and was walking home through a quiet street when he was ambushed. A single shot to the head. When police arrived, the crime scene felt all too familiar. But there was one major difference. A witness. Across the street, an insomniac elderly woman had been sitting by her window. She didn't see the actual shot, but she saw the man fleeing, quick, limping, and ducking into a black car. This was huge. The killer had always been on foot before. Now he had a vehicle. The woman managed to recall a partial license plate and described the car as a compact black sedan. With this lead, investigators canvassed vehicle registrations in the region, cross-referencing with their growing profile. Within a week, they had a short list of suspects. Using the information from the vehicle sighting, police began tailing a man named Alfredo Galvez. He matched the physical description, had a slight limp from an old injury, and crucially owned a black sedan with a nearly identical plate number to the one the witness described. Galvez had a minor criminal record, nothing violent, but his psychological evaluations from past incidents showed signs of narcissism and delusional thinking. He believed in symbols and claimed to receive visions. Police placed him under discreet surveillance. They couldn't arrest him without hard evidence, but they could monitor him. On the night of May 15th, Galvez left his apartment carrying a bag. He drove toward a residential district and parked near a park entrance. Undercover officers followed on foot. Galvez wandered the park for nearly 30 minutes, seemingly looking for someone. Finally, he approached a young man sitting on a bench. That's when the officers moved in. He was arrested without incident. Inside his bag, they found a loaded handgun. Ballistics would later match it to the previous murders, and a deck of Spanish playing cards with the Ace of Cups missing. Under interrogation, Galvez refused to confess. He spoke in riddles, quoted obscure religious texts, and talked about restoring balance. But his handwriting matched the scribbled notes found in his apartment, pages describing his kills in poetic language. The most chilling part? He saw himself not as a murderer, but as a harbinger of correction. He believed the Ace of Cups represented a divine chalice, one he was tipping over, spilling false wealth and corruption onto the streets. Experts diagnosed him with schizoaffective disorder, but the court ruled him competent to stand trial. The media dubbed him the Spanish card killer. At trial, the courtroom was packed. Families of the victims sat in silence as forensic evidence, ballistics, and testimony from survivors painted a clear picture. The verdict: guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Though the killer was behind bars, the legacy of fear he left behind lingered. People continued to look over their shoulders at night, Sales of home security systems soared. Even years later, the Ace of Cups became a symbol of urban terror. Filmmakers, authors, and podcasters told and retold his story. Yet what disturbed people the most wasn't the randomness of his killings, but the eerie calm with which he carried them out. Madrid would never forget the shadow cast by Alfredo Galvez, the man who tried to turn murder into a message. And every time someone saw a deck of Spanish playing cards, they couldn't help but glance twice at the Ace of Cups. Let me know if you'd like